Chapter 2, Family Tree. My dad ran off when I was in kindergarten, and my mom went after him. My grandmother raised me until this past summer. That's when my mom finally stopped trying to get my dad turned around and remembered about me. One morning she rang the doorbell. "Who's there?" I yelled, and when Grandma and I yanked open the door, a stranger was standing on the porch mat, like one of those church ladies dressed in shiny shoes and a Sunday hat. "I'm sorry for being gone so long," she said. "I'm sorry you're back," Grandma snapped and shoved me out of the way with her elbow, which nearly jammed my Tootsie Pop down my throat. "I just want to smooth things out," said the lady who was my mom. "I've heard this all before," Grandma shouted and shoved me back again because I kept sticking my head around her hips so I could see what was going on. I really wasn't sure what either of them was talking about because I didn't recognize the lady. Then she pushed the door open and took one big giant step right into the living room before anyone told her she could. "Hi, Joey," she said. "I'm your mom." When she reached out and tried to touch my head, I ducked away and said I wasn't sure she was my mom because I didn't even remember what she looked like. She got an awful pain across her face, and I figured she must be my mom because no stranger would have been so hurt by what I'd said. But she didn't crumble. Instead, she started walking all through the rooms, just shaking her head at the way Grandma and I kept things. "Now that I'm back," she said, "things are going to change around here. No more living in a pig pen." Then right away she started making up new rules and trying to take control of me and Grandma in the house. I didn't like her at all, and during those first weeks she was back, we all fought pretty good. I was a wired up mess by the time Mom came back to live with me and Grandma. By then, everyone thought my grandma was the nutty old lady responsible for my bad behavior. But I am how I am because Grandma was born wired, and my dad, Carter Pigza, was born wired, and I followed right behind them. It's as if our family tree looks like a set of high-voltage wires strung across a field from one steel tower to the next. Grandma all the time said I was just like my dad, bouncing off the walls 24 hours a day. But he hasn't yet bounced in our direction, so I guess he's still bouncing around somewhere else. Grandma said he bounced over to Pittsburgh. But someday he might spring back and just bounce right through our front door. I wish he would, because I only just hear about him now, and I'd like to see for myself what he's like. I have one of those wind-up cars with twisty wheels that when it bumps into things can change direction and bump into something else over and over. When I play with it, I always think my dad is steering, eyes spinning in his head and his foot all the way down on the gas. My toy car gets drained and stops, but I'm guessing he never winds down. He just keeps on smashing into buildings and signs and parked cars. I figure we got a lot in common because once when Grandma was in a sudden good mood, she said to me as a helpful warning, "Joey, I want you to pull your act together. You don't want to turn out like your father, do you?" "Can I get back to you on that?" I yelled as I tried to run off. "Listen to me," she said, grabbing me as I ran by. "Your dad's such a nervous wreck. He couldn't stand still long enough to line up for free medicine down at the clinic." Then Grandma held me by the ears and I lifted my feet off the floor until I wiggled like a snake and screamed, and she let go. People who blame Grandma for my behavior are unfair to think that she was really the crazy one and I was innocent. It was more like we were whacked out partners. We zipped around the house and slapped at each other like one of those world wrestling tag teams. I'd be the Hulk and she'd be Dr. Doom, and when the phone rang, we'd run at it, screaming and yelling and slam into each other. By the time one of us got the upper hand, the person on the other end had freaked out and hung up. And nothing in the house was ever finished or cleaned up right. A jigsaw puzzle of ancient Egypt outlined the dining room table with the extra pieces piled up like pyramids spilling over onto the floor. I had stacks of homework I'd forgotten and drawings of my grandmother's face on big locust bug bodies all taped to the floors as if she'd been squashed by a truck. I stuck wet leaves over the windows, glued my stuffed animals to the chairs, hid all the oven knobs in the dead plant pots, and made huge string spider webs between the doorknobs and ceiling lights and floor vents. Every now and again I'd catch Grandma in a web, and she'd get tangled up. "Help me! Help me!" she'd squeak like the fly with the human face in that crazy bug movie. Sometimes she could be funny, but not often. Most times she'd just get mad and keep after me nonstop and complain about everything I did. After Mom came back this past summer and started to organize things, Grandma got worse. She got meaner, and I think it was because she didn't like rules either. I had to stay with her when Mom was at work, and she began to scare me. About a month before school started, she was mean all morning as usual in the afternoon. Instead of settling down to knit, she kept getting meaner and meaner. Finally, she got so mad at me for bouncing around, she threw everything out of the refrigerator and yanked out the shelves and flung them across the floor. "Now get inside and stay inside," she said, with the ketchup bottle still spinning around her feet like a bowling pin. That slowed me down. I looked at her, and her dentures were pulled over to one side and snapping like she couldn't control them, like they could climb up the side of her face and bite her own ear off. "In!" she shouted. "Get in before I blow a fuse!" A hot, steamy sound came out with each word. "Don't make me," I said, hopping from foot to foot. "Don't!" "In!" she said, and her body snapped like a whip. "I said get in or I'll tell your mom you won't listen to my rules." But I wouldn't get in. I knew there were good rules and bad rules, and having a timeout inside a refrigerator was a bad rule. "Lousy, no good kid," she said, slamming the door. "I need a break." She turned and marched outside to smoke a cigarette while sitting in the porch rocker. In a minute, I heard her get after someone about throwing trash in our yard, and then she stomped off. When my mom came home that night from work, I was alone and scared. She saw the kitchen all a mess, and I told her what had happened. "No wonder you're a nervous wreck," Mom said, and she was angry. We went looking for Grandma and found one scuffed up shoe down by the corner sewer grate, and that was all. After Mom thought about it, she said, "Grandma was probably so wired she slipped right down into the sewer and was washed away for good." We never did call the police. For a couple days, I kept bending down over the iron grate and cupping my hands and shouting into the dark hole, "Grandma, Grandma, I forgive you. Come back." She never answered, and I was sorry because I was the same as her at times when I lost it. "Grandma isn't exactly like you," Mom said to me after I told her I was sad. "The difference is she's more active in the mouth, and you are more active in the feet. Grandma was always saying the wrong, hurtful things for half the day. Then she spent the other half the day apologizing. She has a hyperactive mouth," my mother said. "You know how sometimes you can't stop moving your feet or swinging on the doors or jumping on the bed?" "Yes," I said, hanging my head and scratching at the dry patch on my scalp that I had already rubbed bald and a little bloody. Mom pulled my hand away and held it between hers. "Well, your grandmother can't help but say things like, 'You don't know what you're doing, you're ruining everything, you never listen to me, I always said you were dumb as dirt.' Mom was right. Grandma would just get so excited about being mean that one thing would lead to another, and before long, she didn't know what she was saying, but her lips were flapping a mile a minute. Then when she finally settled down, she'd feel bad. 'I'm so sorry,' she'd begin. 'I never knew anything I said upset anyone. You all shouldn't listen to me. You know I'm just a nasty, trash-talking old fool.' She'd say the same thing over and over again. She should have been on meds too, big-time grandma-sized meds. But because she was a grandma, people didn't think she was sick. They just called her a batty old bird. But she was sick like me, only old, so her sickness was different. Now all that's changed since Mom came back, and I couldn't live without her because she's really the only one who understands how I am when I get worked up into a wild spell. Like yesterday before school, when I was playing stuntman in the early morning, I was diving from the top of the stepladder Mom had left up to change the burned-out ceiling lights. I belly flopped onto the couch, then bounced onto the floor. She woke up and in seconds pinned me down and pressed her face to mine and said, "So what's up, Doc? You gonna be even or odd today?" "Can I get back to you on that?" I said, trying to squirm away. Then suddenly she held out both fists in front of me. "Pick one," she said. I did, and my pill was in her hand. It's always in her hand, like she is some kind of magic Pez meds dispenser. "See," she said calmly and stroked my head. "You know how to choose what's good for you. So are you going to put the ladder away?" "Yeah," I said, laughing, and got to my feet. I swallowed my pill without water and could feel it roll, then stumble, then roll a little more, then stumble all the way down my throat and vanish into my belly. Then I picked the ladder up and darted across the room. But my aim was off and I slammed into the door jamb. That jarred me. Then I tried it again and again until I nearly had all the paint chipped off around the dented woodwork, and she just let me keep on trying until finally I got the ladder and the opening lined up just right and stumbled through and plowed into the kitchen table and knocked the plastic rooster salt and pepper shakers to the floor. "Even when you were a baby, you had a hard time getting a square peg into a square hole," she called out from behind me. "Remember rule number 1, slow down and think about what you're doing." Mom is big on rules for me.